Hello and welcome to another episode of Help Nobody Told Me. I'm your host today, Shannon Johnson. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway here on the North Shore of Chicago. And my co-host today is my good friend Mindy Leonard of SOS, Super Organized Spaces.
Yeah, so
Yay.
happy to be here and hosting with you. And we are on round 2 with our guest today, Jorie Houlihan. She is your guide for the dopamine deprived. So she is a coach for women who have been diagnosed with ADHD as adults, or maybe they were diagnosed when they were younger, but they're just accepting it as an adult.
Denial is a thing.
Yes, right. Yeah. Okay, yes, I do have ADHD. I'm finally going to deal with the reality of that.
Yes.
Yes. And we've had you on before, which was great. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, you know what? Let's twist this around and talk about, okay, so you've got ADHD.
And we talked about what the signs are and what it looks like.
Right.
And so,
but strengths.
It comes with a lot of strengths.
And
we don't think about that.
No one
Nobody
talks
thinks
about
about
that.
Right. No one talks about it. And
Let's talk about it, Jorie.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Okay.
I'm in.
All right. Good to you're here. Okay. So strengths. What should people know?
So people with ADHD we actually have a lot of strengths. And it's just that sometimes the challenges are so overwhelming that you think you're broken and that you don't have strengths. But when they start working with me, I start to point out little things like how resilient they are, right? The whole first part of working with a client is just the self-awareness aspect of this is part of your ADHD, but it isn't just the challenges that I'm pointing out, it's also the strengths. So the fact that they're very persistent and resilient, the fact that they are probably a better creative problem solver than they're giving themselves credit for, the fact that they are great storytellers or that they are really empathetic, and that we see patterns and gaps in, say, an organization, maybe in a workflow kind of thing, and that other people don't see. And so when I start to point out things like that, they go, oh, wait, that's a strength? I'm like, yeah. And they say, where else have you used this? Like, you're using it in this kind of scenario. Where else could you apply that? And they go, oh, I didn't even really think it was a strength. And so it's really interesting for me as a coach to witness those light bulbs turn on, because they're like, oh, maybe I'm not as broken as I thought I was, right? And so there are so many things that where I can point out you are absolutely capable and you are not broken. That's like one of the biggest messages I'm always giving them. You're not broken, I promise. The metaphor I usually give is, I don't know if it's a metaphor or whatever, I missed that day in English class, but it was, while the rest of the world was born with a PC brain, we were born with Macs. But the Mac brain isn't the problem. The problem is that we were given the PC manual to work with. And so every personal development course you've ever taken, professional development course, any of these things are designed usually for neurotypical people. And so you learn the things, but then you struggle to apply them. But it isn't because you're broken, it's just that they weren't designed for how your brain processes information. And so when we can figure that out, then they go, oh, okay, now I figured out, like, okay, so this is a challenge, and this is how I can use one of my strengths to kind of put a guardrail around that. And then you really start to see the flow where they start to, their confidence starts to improve. They start coming in. I start every session with, give me some wins. And in the beginning, they're like, well, I knew you were going to ask, and I don't really, because I don't see them as wins. And then as we start talking, they're like, oh yeah, that's a win.
So tell me a great win that someone walked in that just like knocked your socks off.
So a great win was, I have a client who has dealt with RSD, which is rejection sensitive dysphoria. That's part of the emotional dysregulation component of ADHD. And
what does that mean?
So rejection sensitive dysphoria is even the perception of a slight or a criticism can send you just spiraling, where by the time you have hit rock bottom, you're like, everyone hates me.
So uber sensitive to criticism.
Yes.
Okay.
And because we have emotional dysregulation, it's a big struggle to catch it and to stop it before it really accelerates. And we have just worked on ways to help her calm her central nervous system, and, how to maybe, what are some types of situations where this is going to be a trigger for you, right? And so what are some things we can put in place so that if you walk into that kind of a scenario, you will have like a toolbox. And we had a session, and she was like, I use the toolbox.
Oh,
I was like, what'd you do? And she was like, I had to go to this, it was a holiday party, and she had to go with her husband, and she hated it. And, those are the things that really get her overwhelmed and overstimulated, because it's a lot of people. And she said, and I did some stuff before I even went in, like I did some deep breathing, so I went in already calmer than I normally do. And then when I started to feel overwhelmed, I just excused myself, and she had told her husband, this is going to be the sign I need to go regulate. And she just went into the bathroom, and she did some more deep breathing, and then she came back out, and that was how she handled the evening. And she was so proud of herself, because normally these things would send her reeling, sometimes for days. And she was like, I totally had it. I felt so good. And it was just one of my favorite moments, because you never know.
Not only was she able to get through it, but she was there to support her husband, which is another, like,
yes,
hurrah, I was able to support him at his event, instead of him dragging me. That's like huge. Like, we all want to be there for our spouse. So
yeah, it was huge. And she was, like I said, she was so proud of herself. And that really, since that point, I have really started to see an increase in things like self-trust. Because self-trust is something we really struggle with, because we've been told our whole life we were doing it wrong, even though we were just doing it the way we processed information, right? Mm-hmm. And so when they start to see, these actions are actually having good results, these things that I'm doing now they're seeing the evidence, right?
Right.
And so it really then starts to build that self-trust, which I also consider to be a strength really for everybody, not just ADHD, but when somebody with ADHD can latch on to that, that's huge.
That's got to be such a thrill for you. And then I'm sure she's learning now to parlay that into other pieces of her daily life, right? And then it's just a snowball effect and motivational. Mm-hmm. I'm almost wondering if we should take a really teeny little step back for a minute.
Yeah.
Just in case there's anybody who's watching or listening who maybe doesn't really understand what ADHD is. Could you just briefly say what that is, just so that we're all on the same page?
So ADHD is a neurobiological difference. And so we struggle with executive functioning. So those are things like planning, organizing, prioritizing, that kind of thing. And we struggle with our emotions. We have emotional dysregulation. And really what it is it is a self-regulation issue more than anything. So it's not actually that we have a deficit of attention. The name really undermines what it is. It's not that we have a deficit. We actually our brain wants to pay attention to everything. We just can't always regulate where it goes and when it happens, because we also have hyperfocus where we can really focus on things and hours pass and we don't even realize it. But the lack of regulation, that also then includes obviously the emotions, things like that. But we have things like time blindness, so we can't feel time passing. We tend to be what I call time optimists, where we think we can fit way more into 10 minutes than we can, because our brain can't gauge how long something will take, and as a result it makes it very challenging to be able to prioritize. Everything feels equally important. And so those are all skills that I work on, with my clients, obviously. But that is, there's a lot to ADHD, but that's I guess, the most general way I can put it. So.
No, I think that's helpful. It's just nice so when people are listening and you're talking about, today's whole session is to talk about strengths and how to, really build on those strengths that somebody has when they have ADHD. But it's nice so we are all sort of on the same playing field.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So, okay. All right. Well, thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Have you had moments, besides the one that you talk about already, but where somebody is really surprised at maybe some resiliency that they've come across, or?
Yeah, I I have had clients that when we start the session, I'll say, do you have any wins? And, especially I can tell sometimes because they're chomping at the bit. And I'm like, oh, they got to win.
Yeah.
But, I have one client that is in and out of court all the time with an ex. And she gets really overwhelmed. And overwhelm is a really big part of ADHD. Okay, that's part of that emotional dysregulation. And she's like, I handled it. And she came in, she knew to have things written down so she wouldn't forget, because we have out of sight, out of mind, right? So I'm always like, externalize your thoughts whenever possible. And so she started to do that. So she would go into court and she would have things written out instead of trying to just remember things. And she has then started using some of these skills because she's now started to create a business. And creating a business, as you women know, is a lot of executive functioning. And a lot of people with ADHD are entrepreneurs. We're 5 times more likely to be entrepreneurs.
Talk about a strength.
Yes, I was going to say, if you want to talk about a strength.
That's huge.
Yes. But the problem is that we struggle to implement. We know the things, but there is a kind of a cut in the brain, so to speak, not literally, but that we know what to do, but there's something about the knowing part of the brain and the doing part of the brain that don't communicate with each other. And so that is one of the reasons that it's really challenging, and it's usually due to lack of dopamine, because dopamine is a neurotransmitter that gets you to do the thing, and we have a deficit of it. So if you don't have the brain chemical to give you the motivation to do something, it is really challenging to get started. And then when you're doing a business, right, it can be really overwhelming, because you have all these things you have to do.
Well, there's all the pieces all over the place. So
yes.
If you're looking at 5 different things and they all seem like the same priority, how do you organize it?
Yes. And so that is one of the things that we cover. I'm like, if you really are stuck, just ask yourself this one question. What is the worst thing that could happen if I don't get this done today? Right? Because that will take off a lot of low-hanging fruit. Because sometimes we'll do the things that are really quick to check the check boxes, which does give us dopamine. And if you're really low on dopamine, I will say, okay, maybe do 1 or 2 of those. But I don't want you to use up all your energy, because our energy also works differently in ADHD. I don't want you using up all your energy on the kind of the lower items on the totem pole, and where you're not going to really move your goals forward. And so when they start to ask that question, that's another time where they go.
It's a good question for all of us to ask.
That's what I'm thinking.
I'm thinking, yeah.
Right?
When you get down in the nitty gritty of stuff and you're like, okay, I don't know what to do, but
yeah,
is it going to matter if I don't get the clothes folded today? Is that what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'm going to get clothes out of the basket tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that's not the number 1 priority.
No. Right? And I have said, it's, we have all or nothing thinking, and so it's a lot of, I have to do everything on the to-do list. Otherwise, I am useless and I'm not capable, and people will think I'm lazy. And I'm like, no, you're going to brain dump, because, again, externalizing your thoughts, get all those things out of your head, and then you're going to pick 3. And, of course, they look at this giant list, and I'm like, again, ask yourself for each one, what is the worst case if I don't do this today? Think about, what do I have to do today, because I know I have to do this other thing tomorrow, and I can't do it if this isn't done, right? Those are questions to ask.
Or I have to feed my children today. No.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Those people I'm supposed to keep alive in my home.
Yeah, so, I might have to go to the grocery store,
right, right.
But it's just a way for them to, first of all, slow down, because our brains move so fast, and we're just trying to, do. And our biggest fear is that people will think that we're lazy, because we've been called that most of our lives, when it was executive dysfunction the whole time, right? And so they're also working through their narratives. And so I do a little thing with people when they first start to help them see what their self-talk is, because sometimes it's such a part of who we are, we don't even hear it anymore. And then, okay, now how can we redirect that, right? How can we change it so then it's maybe kind of funny or just bizarre, so then it takes the edge off of that. And so those are things that help people go, wow, I really am terrible about how I talk to myself. I didn't even realize. But then when they start to see it, they can change that, and that has been a really positive influence for a lot of these women. And I'm not sure if I answered your question. My mind just went, welcome to ADHD.
I don't even know what my question was. So how's that? So I think you did a fabulous job.
Well, thank you.
I'm chalking that up to a strength right there. I think that was fabulous. Yes, thank you.
Another strength we have is we do have a really good sense of humor. You have to. Like, yesterday I was standing there and I had 2 forks. And I was like, why did I get a second fork? And my husband's standing there, he's like, probably because you have ADHD and you forgot you had the first fork, and it just was like in my hand, and it just become a part of my limb, and I was like, oh, okay,
an extension.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's great. That's great.
So, as they discover these strengths, how do they evolve, and how do they change over time?
That's a really good question. So when people start to see the strengths, I see hesitation in the beginning of trusting it. Like, oh, maybe that was a one-off. Or, well, I'm not always good at it. Again, that all or nothing thinking. And so I have to remind them, like, you're not going to be, there's no such thing as perfect. Perfectionism runs rampant in our group. And so I'm like, there's no such thing as perfect. You're going to have days that are good and days that aren't so good, right? It's important to have that sense of humor for that reason. And it's okay to not beat yourself up if you happen to have a bad day. And the more that they start to do that, and the more they start to trust that it's not always going to feel like this every day, if they are having a bad day, that always helps quite a bit. And when they start to trust themselves more, then they start to lean into the strengths a little bit more, which then helps counter some of the more challenging aspects of their ADHD. And I'm a big believer in external accountability for people with ADHD, because we're just not accountable to ourselves. We will blow through our own deadlines, no problem. But when we have told somebody else what the deadline is, that is incredibly helpful. And one of the things that I really promote, and that I think is a strength, is the ability to ask for help. And so I'm like, you've already shown that because you reached out to me. And they go, oh yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Like, so where else can we apply this in areas where you're struggling? And so then I'm like, do you have somebody that maybe could be an accountability partner, or that you could body double with? Body doubling is working, you can do it virtually or in person, but you just work side by side. You don't talk, you just do your own thing, but there's something about the person sitting there. I actually just heard this on another podcast. This woman who, she used to help people with chronic pain. There's something about when you are with somebody that you guys co-regulate your nervous systems. And so if you're both working on something, there's something about that helps you to focus. And I was like, that makes so much sense.
That's interesting, because Jasmine, my partner, and I are in an accountability group, and some of the people in that group will get on the phone together at a certain time every week, same day every week. They all get on the phone to make their client calls, because we all hate getting on the phone and calling people, but we have to make these phone calls. Yep. Stay in touch and all that kind of stuff. But it's something about they mute the line, they can't hear each other, but they're all on the phone call, making phone calls at the same time on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So it's so it's kind of a body doubling thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely. That's what it is. That is body doubling.
Real life, they'll do it for an hour. Everybody's together doing it.
And there's just something about doing it with other people too, where you don't feel so alone, right? And it's weirdly effective. So
I have a question, because you talked about an accountability partner. However, you also talked about criticism can be a trigger. So if you are supporting someone with ADHD, how do you hold them accountable without being critical?
That's a great question. So when you are choosing an accountability partner, you need to make sure that your personality is aligned, first of all, right? So I'm in a mastermind, and one of my best friends is also in it, and she is very direct. She's very blunt.
That would be me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, probably why I'm asking this question. I'm like,
she also has ADHD, and but I know this about her, and I know that she's coming from a place of love. And so sometimes I do get a little defensive or whatever, depending on what she's talking about. But I always know she's coming from a place of love, and I take what she says, seriously. If you are working with somebody who has ADHD and they don't know you very well, I think building a little bit of a relationship before before handing out what I call feedback, as opposed to criticism. Criticism makes people really defensive, whereas if I say, can I give you some feedback? People tend to be a little more open to that.
Sure.
And so I think part of it is just getting to know the personalities, because I say this all the time, we control our environment. So you can choose who you want as your accountability partner. And if somebody who is really blunt and direct is not your cup of tea, they're just not your cup of tea. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a moral failing on anybody's part. It just is a different type of personality, and you need somebody who maybe is a little bit more, gentle with the approach.
That's why I have a partner. She's gentle. And I come in with the big guns when I need to.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
How can somebody who is going through it, right, and they have come to the realization they have ADHD, or they've been recently diagnosed, and they're listening to this and they're like, I don't have any strengths. What can they do in their own brains to think about what do they do on the daily, or what is a strength? How do you self-identify that?
That is another great question. So here, let me list a few strengths first, and then I'll show you how that can show up. So I personally believe that everybody with ADHD is a creative problem solver. Now, usually when I say the word creative, I get from some people because they only think of art. And I'm like, no, creative problem solving is a completely different thing. It is you seeing a gap, for example. We're really good at pattern recognition and seeing gaps. And so that is you leaning into a strength, because, that's what that is. Then there is that you have a great sense of humor. We're great storytellers. I mean, we go down tangents, but just bear with us. We do. We are out-of-the-box thinkers. We're incredibly innovative. And as I said before, we are far more likely to be entrepreneurial because we see these gaps, and because how we work may not always work in a corporate setting, so to speak, right? So for example, this is one of the things that I really wish employers and schools would pay more attention to, instead of always focusing on, like, if you are a manager and you have an employee that is like always 10 minutes late, but they're doing great work, don't be standing there pointing at your wrist going, you're late, right? Because people leave managers, they don't leave jobs.
Absolutely.
And so if you are somebody who has, maybe you really are struggling with the time blindness, and for whatever reason you really struggle to get to places on time, but you're doing really good work. In the United States anyway, we have, the Americans with Disabilities Act. ADHD is under that. And so you can ask for reasonable accommodation. So maybe it is, so you can show up a little bit later and it's okay as long as you're getting your work done, that kind of thing. Again, though, asking for help is a big plus. We are terrible about asking for help because we're so afraid that people will think we're either being lazy or that we're incompetent. And I'm like, no. To me, being able to ask for help is a strength, because I would rather know that you're not understanding something that needs to be done so we can work on it and it be done correctly than you just try to wing it and then not do it right and then we have to start over or whatever. We are very empathetic. Now, empathetic does not mean empath. There's a lot of people who don't know the difference. So empathetic just simply means we are really good at putting ourselves in other people's shoes, because we know what it's like to have something that's invisible, that people can't see with the eye, and we are misunderstood a lot because of that. And so I find that people with ADHD are very empathetic. They're always trying to understand the other perspective. We have a strong sense of social justice, and we are very persistent, and we're incredibly optimistic. I joke that we're always like, this is the planner that's going to get me organized, which I finally did find a planner that I love, but I have also probably spent enough money to put my kids through college in the amount of planners that I have bought in my lifetime. So, and that's why we have what I call the time optimism. It's just not always well placed, is what I'm saying. But I love that we have that, and we're always looking for ways to be better. And so when somebody is really struggling, I want to remind them that they have survived this long, right? They have gotten this far. What has gotten you to this point, right? Was it your resilience? That's not just going to go away, right? Your persistence, your if it is a situation where maybe they are in a work situation where they're not very good about how they are, right? Then maybe, again, you control your environment. Maybe it's time to look for something that's going to be better for how your brain works, right? It's a matter of reminding yourself you've been here before, you survived it, and again, having that external accountability. Sometimes that's also for those moments where you're like, what the French, I can't do this, right? Because we need those people to be like, you've got this, you've done this before, let's break down what's going on, right? And that's what I am a lot of the time for people, because sometimes they come in and what I had planned for a session is off the table immediately because they're spiraling about something they messed up at work, and we're always afraid we're going to get fired, by the way. It doesn't matter how good you are at your job, how long you've been there. You could have just had the most amazing employee review, and you are still always going to worry that you're going to get fired because you did this little tiny thing wrong, right? So just never be afraid to reach out for just even some encouraging words from somebody in your life.
But it's interesting to me that you said people with ADHD don't always fit into the corporate world. But a lot of the strengths that you talked about, to me, seem like they could be really important to an organization.
Yes. And
so it's almost like, as employers, as corporations, we need to look at the people who work for us differently sometimes.
Yes.
And stop trying to fit a square into a round hole, that kind of a thing, because those strengths can really be utilized. Trying to find the gap in the workflow, like someone that can see that's important.
Yeah. It's
I
huge.
mean, those characteristics
not everyone can see that.
Yeah. With those traits that you were talking about, those strengths, those are characteristics that I would think people would want in partners, people would want in friends, people would want in employees or managers. I mean, and I know I've talked to you about this before, but there's like a little cartoon that I've seen over the years, and it's like a monkey and a fish, and they're like lined up, all these animals, and they're in school, and it's like, if you're trying to teach the fish to climb the tree,
yes,
or the monkey to swim in the water, it's just not going to happen. But like, find these strengths, right, and help that monkey climb higher, and that fish swim deeper or faster or whatever it is. And to your point, meeting people where they're at. The strengths that you talked about, I think, are fabulous characteristics of any human being.
Yes, and those are just a few. And it's interesting that you brought up that because I actually, when I have done webinars, I have a point in every webinar where it's a quote that they thought that Einstein had said it, and then I researched it. Nobody actually really knows who said it, but it was, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life believing it is stupid. And that could not be more true for people who are late diagnosed ADHD, because we are constantly trying to be neurotypical, and we're not. We are designed to swim. And there's nothing wrong with not being able to climb a tree, in the same way that there are some people who can't swim, right?
Right.
We all have different strengths. We all have different ways of processing information. And to what your point about with businesses is, if you find out you have somebody with ADHD in your sphere, be grateful, because they are they're so creative, and again, it's not necessarily the artistic, but they do see where there are challenges that don't need to be challenges. They have really great ways of streamlining things, because their brain just processes that information.
Do a little bit of research and find out how you can use that to your advantage,
yes,
rather than looking at it as a detriment.
Yes,
I think that's the important part.
Yeah, if you, and they really should do that with everybody.
Right.
Everybody has strengths, and sometimes we take a job because it's a job, but if you are an employer, if you are hiring people, you want to find out, well, what are you really good at, and where can we best utilize this, instead of, well, this person's always late. Yeah, but she completely renovated our marketing system, plan, and it was amazing. Like, why are you focusing on that? And I see that happen way too often. And it is really, and of course, the person on the receiving end of that feels like, oh, I failed again. I'm like, no, they're failing you. That's a totally different thing.
Oh,
perfect.
You need to say that again. Yes, they're failing you.
Yeah.
Because you're not broken.
Right.
And they just, there's different things that I know I've said in my life different times. Like, I know what something means to me if someone's going through whatever, or they've diagnosed with it. Like, I have my understanding of what this means to me. But can you tell me what it means to you? Mm-hmm. And then from that, then you kind of learn an understanding of how to work with that person or whatever. But I think having that just directness and learning about how someone's brain works, no two brains work the same,
right.
whether you have ADHD or you don't, right? But to be able in any situation, see your strengths and learn from it and grow and realize your value.
Absolutely.
And
huge.
I can't tell you how many times, like, I have been on a podcast or, like on my, Instagram or whatever, and I get DMs or emails from spouses, parents, siblings, the work saying, thank you for making me better understand this topic. My spouse deals with this, and I just thought it was whatever. Now I'm better understanding it. Because sometimes people need that sort of third-party validation, right? And so when I get people who are like, how do I explain this to I'm like, send them to my Instagram. Because I've got all kinds of topics on there, and when they're looking at it, they can go, oh, it's not just my spouse. This happens to a lot of people.
Right.
Okay. And so that has been, it's been really reassuring for me, actually, to see how often that happens, where somebody reaches out who doesn't have it themselves, but they're trying to understand a loved one or an employee or whatever, where they just go, okay, now I better understand this, and I just wanted to say thank you. It's really... It's amazing.
How gratifying.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So
you are definitely doing what you need to be doing.
Totally.
I hope so.
Yes.
And we hope today that you have found some value in what Jorie has brought to us, and maybe you better understand someone in your sphere just because you listened today. On Help, Nobody Told Me.